It's winter. The kind of winter that kills. Snow covers the valley. The river has frozen solid. For 3 days, your group hasn't found anything worth hunting. Everyone is hungry. Everyone is tired. And then the oldest man in the tribe stops breathing. At first, nobody understands what they're looking at. Yesterday, he was sitting beside the fire, sharpening stone tools and telling stories. Now he's lying on the cave floor, silent, still, cold. A child walks over and pokes his arm. Nothing happens. The child does it again. Still nothing. Something has changed. Something permanent. And nobody knows what to do next. Here's the strange thing. Death wasn't new. Long before humans existed, animals had been dying for hundreds of millions of years. Lions died. Wolves died. Mammoths died. But at some point, one species started reacting differently. Instead of walking away, they stayed. Instead of abandoning the body, they carried it. Instead of forgetting, they remembered. And that decision may have changed human history forever. Imagine you're living 100,000 years ago. A dead body isn't just sad. It's dangerous. The smell attracts predators. Hyenas can smell carrion from miles away. So can wolves. So can bears. Keeping a corpse near camp could get everyone killed. From a survival perspective, the correct decision should be obvious. Leave. Immediately. But ancient humans kept doing something that made no evolutionary sense. They stopped. They dug. They buried. Why? The danger wasn't just predators. It was uncertainty. A child sleeping beside a dead body doesn't understand what happened. Neither does the tribe. Nobody knows if whatever killed one person might kill another. Nobody knows if the body itself is dangerous. Nobody knows how long they can stay near it safely. For ancient humans, death wasn't simply an emotional problem. It was a survival problem. And yet, again and again, they chose to spend valuable time dealing with their dead. Time they could have spent hunting, gathering food, building shelter, staying alive. Here's where things get strange. In northern Spain, deep inside a cave system, archaeologists discovered something called the Pit of Bones. Thousands of feet from daylight, pitch black, silent. And at the bottom lay the remains of dozens of ancient humans. Nobody lived there. Nobody slept there. Nobody hunted there. Bodies had been carried into the darkness on purpose, one by one. Think about that. Imagine carrying the body of someone you love through narrow tunnels lit only by flickering firelight. Why go through all that effort? Why risk getting trapped underground? Why not simply leave them outside? Scientists believe the answer reveals something extraordinary about the human mind. A lion can lose another lion. An elephant can lose another elephant. Some animals even appear to mourn. But humans seem uniquely obsessed with the dead. We visit graves. We keep photographs. We build monuments. We name buildings after people who died centuries ago. And the roots of that behavior may stretch back far beyond civilization itself. Perhaps even before our own species existed. At some point, early humans may have developed a terrifying ability. The ability to understand that death wasn't just happening to other creatures. It would happen to them too. Think about that realization. One day you're watching an elderly member of your group die, and suddenly a thought appears. If he died, then I can die. If she died, then everyone I know can die. For perhaps the first time in Earth's history, a creature became aware of its own mortality. That realization may have been one of the most important moments in human evolution, and one of the most frightening. Then something happened that surprised researchers. Neanderthals may have been doing it too. Not just surviving, not just hunting, not just making tools, mourning. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, archaeologists found evidence suggesting Neanderthals deliberately placed their dead in prepared graves. One individual had survived years of severe injuries, a damaged arm, a damaged leg, partial blindness. By all logic, he should have died long before, but he didn't. Because his group kept him alive, fed him, protected him, cared for him, for years. And when he finally died, they didn't leave him behind. What was that actually like? Picture the scene. Smoke hangs in the air. The cave smells of damp stone and ash. Outside, the world is dangerous. Inside, a family kneels beside someone they have known their entire lives. No doctors, no religion, no explanation, just grief. Raw and confusing. The same feeling millions of people experience today. Because the strange thing is, your brain still runs on much of the same ancient software. Scientists think grief may be the cost of love. The stronger the social bond, the greater the pain when it breaks. In other words, grief isn't a flaw. It's evidence that human cooperation became so powerful that losing another person literally hurts. The pain serves no purpose after death, but the attachment served an enormous purpose before it. It helped humans become the most cooperative species on Earth. But that wasn't the end of the story. Around the world, archaeologists kept finding burials that became increasingly elaborate. Bodies weren't simply placed in the ground. They were arranged, decorated, remembered. At sites in the Middle East, researchers discovered people buried with deer antlers carefully placed beside them. Elsewhere, they found shell necklaces, animal teeth, stone tools, red ochre pigment covering bones like a layer of symbolic paint. These objects had no practical purpose. The dead couldn't use them, which raises an extraordinary question. Who were these gifts really for? The dead or the living? Then came one of the most shocking discoveries of all. Around 34,000 years ago, in what is now Russia, two children were buried together at a site called Sunghir. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary grave. It wasn't. The children had been buried with thousands of ivory beads, carefully crafted ornaments, mammoth ivory spears, objects that would have required thousands of hours of labor to create. Think about that. A group of hunter-gatherers living in one of the harshest environments on Earth spent an incredible amount of time creating gifts for children who would never use them. Why? Because by this point, death had become more than a biological event. It had become meaningful. The dead were no longer simply absent. They remained important, even after they were gone. But there was another mystery. Where did people think the dead actually went? Nobody knows exactly when humans first imagined an afterlife, but evidence suggests that ancient people increasingly behaved as if death wasn't the end. Some buried loved ones with tools. Others buried them with ornaments. Some covered them in red ochre, a color often associated with blood and life. It was as if people were preparing the dead for another journey, a place nobody had ever seen, yet many believed existed. And that may have changed everything. Because once humans started asking, where did they go? Other questions followed. Are they still watching us? Will we see them again? What happens when we die? Those questions may have helped create religion, mythology, art, ceremony, perhaps even language itself. Death wasn't just something humans survived. It became one of the forces that shaped what humans are. The strange thing is, your brain still works this way today. You still feel the urge to gather when someone dies. You still leave flowers, still build memorials, still tell stories about people who are gone. None of those things bring anyone back, but they do something else. They keep people from disappearing completely. And perhaps that's what ancient humans were trying to do all along. Not defeat death. Defeat forgetting. The next time you stand at a funeral, leave flowers on a grave, or stare at an old photograph of someone who is gone, remember this. You are participating in a ritual older than cities, older than farming, older than history itself. A ritual that began beside dying fires long before anyone wrote a single word. Ancient humans never solved death, neither have we. What they did instead was something profoundly human. They refused to let the people they loved disappear without a trace. And maybe that's why they carried bodies into caves, why they dug graves into frozen ground, why they left gifts that would never be used. Why they returned to the same burial places generation after generation. Not because they understood death, but because they understood love. And love, unlike a human life, leaves traces behind. So somewhere in the darkness of prehistory, beside a dying fire and a silent body, the first funeral may have begun. Not with words, not with religion, not with ceremony, but with a simple idea. A person mattered, and more than 100,000 years later, we are still trying to say exactly the same thing.